Tapped and attacking. This is a keyword that you will see a lot in Magic the Gathering and especially in Commander. There's a lot of commanders that have this kind of keyword text and it shows up a lot, especially in red, which if you know anything about me, you know is one of my favorite colors. Today, we're going to be talking about why I love this mechanic so much, some ways that you can use it to your advantage in Commander, and some commanders that work well with this type of mechanic. And if you guys are new here, please feel free to like and subscribe and comment down below why you like tapped and attacking. So, tapped and attacking. I think I've said that about 10 times in this entire video so far, and it's only been 30 seconds. This mechanic has always been a favorite of mine. Even in my very first commander deck, Strafon, this is a mechanic that happens often. You make a lot of blood tokens, you then sacrifice 2 blood tokens in order to put a vampire onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. Ever since I started playing Magic the Gathering, this has been a mechanic that I have interacted with. It's also a mechanic I've used a lot in other decks like Othari, Animpakal, and it shows up a lot in other decks like Marchesa and Jetmir. It's safe to say that I really love this mechanic. There's just something about making a board state out of nowhere with a ton of token makers, or a single token maker. I think Othari was my favorite deck for just so long because of the fact that I could make an entire board state out of one creature, getting a ton of experience counters and getting a board state out of literally nothing, even if Othari were to die, just feels a little bit broken in my opinion. But that's not all that I like about tapped and attacking creatures. Tapped and attacking creatures are hard to deal with, especially when they come from one source. Let's say you have something like a crawl space or a propaganda or any of these taxing effects when somebody attacks you. Well, tapped and attacking creatures actually don't care about this mechanic. See, most of these things say that you cannot attack with X amount of creatures, or you must pay X for each creature. But this is only on the declare attacker phase. Once attackers are already declared, then the tapped and attacking creatures come in, and then you can choose the target. So effects like this don't even matter when they come in tapped and attacking. Tapped and attacking is also extremely strong and hard to deal with because in most cases, you're not keeping track of the fact that somebody can make a board state out of nowhere. Let's talk about Tilinali's Summoner. This is literally an entire board state and a single creature, and it's so powerful because you have that element of surprise. Let's say I go to combat and all I have on my board is Jetmir and Tilinali's Summoner. While I'm attacking, I can pay a ton of mana in order to get that 9 creature buff from Jetmir, and I can simply win the game from there. That is the power of tapped and attacking, especially when you have other pieces surrounding it that make your creatures bigger. Cards like Shared Animosity are great for tapped and attacking, as basically if you're making a ton of tokens with tapped and attacking, they're always going to share a creature type because they're usually coming from one source. Tapped and attacking is hard to interact with, especially with these taxing effects or stacks pieces, and they're hard to deal with because you'll never actually know how many creatures are going to be coming at you. Now, of course, you certainly can. If Othari has 4 experience counters, you know Othari is going to make 5 the next time because you'll get an experience counter and then you'll make 5 tokens. But when you can't see the creatures right in front of you on the board yet, it's kind of hard to have that threat assessment when you don't quite know what the strategy is supposed to do. And especially in something like Othari with extra combats, you don't realize that if they only have 4 experience counters and Othari comes out, by the end of the turn, there's 11 rebels on the board. You'll get 5 from the first combat and then 6 from the second. Add that up with a shared animosity effect and it's over for you. One other reason I like tapped and attacking is just how aggressive it truly is. You don't need to worry about summoning sickness. You don't need to worry about giving your creatures haste. You in fact don't really need to worry about anything. Tapped and attacking gets you exactly what you want. Creatures attacking your opponents. And with a lot of commanders, they actually give them indestructible in a lot of cases, depending on the type of tapped and attacking they're getting. Usually if they're focused around 1 or 2 creatures at a time, they're going to give it some extra keywords besides just tapped and attacking. Take Strafon and Winota for example. But then when you're trying to go wider than all of your opponents, something like Othari or Animpakal are also going to be great. Now, obviously, there's a lot more examples that I could give, but these are just some of the commanders that I'm most familiar with. I love working with these kind of commanders. They're in my favorite color combo, which is in red-white. Strafon, of course, is in Rakdos, but Strafon has a special place in my heart anyways. Now, there are some other creatures that have adjacent tapped and attacking kind of effects, where when they come in, they technically are given haste and you can attack then. The reason I'm not as fond of these kind of effects is, again, we still have that restriction of some taxing effects. If you have Propaganda and you have an Othari on the board, you only need to pay 2 in order to attack your opponent fully. But with something like Xenagos or Henzi, you still need to pay that tax for each creature that's coming there. Now, if you only have one attacker anyways, it's not that big of a deal, but I'd rather not worry about that restriction, and I'd rather have plenty of creatures attacking my opponents at once. That's why tapped and attacking is superior. So now we've talked about some of the strengths of tapped and attacking, and there's a lot more that I could go into, but now I'm going to talk about some of the best commanders with tapped and attacking. And we've actually mentioned quite a bit of them already. So obviously I'm going to be talking about someone like Othari in this video. Othari is a great commander to have at the helm of your deck, as it doesn't need a lot of gas in the actual deck. It just needs a ton of support, and Othari will get you there on its own. Experience counters are basically impossible to interact with, and if you just add a couple of extra combat spells, you add a ton of draw support from token creation, you add a lot of removal, and a lot of protection, you're in a great spot already. You can then add some impact tremor type effects, which I obviously have in mind, but you don't even really need that. Maybe you just want to focus on some anthem effects so that your rebels hit that much harder. Or maybe you want to go a more stacksy route yourself to make sure nobody can really hit you on the crackback. There's a ton of ways that Othari can go, and the reason I like it so much is because it only needs support cards. It doesn't need a lot of gas itself. Another one I like that we've had on this channel before as well is Gut True Salt Zealot, especially when combined with Inspired Leader. This is just crazy, as early as turn 4, you can have 2 to maybe even 3 6/3 tapped and attacking menace skeletons. You heard that right. On turn 4, as long as you're hitting your mana curve and you have plenty of sack fodder, you can be doing a ton of damage to your opponents. I highly recommend a deck like this, as well as it's very budget friendly, as most of your sack fodder is usually around 20 to 30 cent cards. Now, if you want to say no Boros allowed at all, that is totally fine. And there are some other options out there that are available for you. I've actually previously worked on a Geist of St. Traft commander deck. It's on my Mox field and it should be in the description below. And the fact that it has hexproof and makes a ton of tokens is really great. Now, these tokens are exiled at the end of combat, so you're not going to be able to keep them around as blockers, and they're only going to do minimal impact. But the fact that your commander has hexproof says a lot. Add a ton of token doublers or triplers, have these tokens spread out some damage while you focus down one player with a bunch of auras and commander damage. This kind of strategy is surprisingly aggressive, and having a ton of 4/4s hit your other opponents while you focus down one player is surprisingly effective. So if you don't want to go the Boros route, that's totally fine. Geist of St. Traft is a pretty creative commander that you could go with. And now, of course, we can't talk about something as aggressive as tapped and attacking without just talking about straight up mono red. Calamity Galloping Inferno is actually insane. It's a newer card from Outlaws of Thunder Junction that's gonna make your already incredibly valuable red creatures be that much more effective. Simply saddle up Calamity and you're making 2 copies of a creature. You can add creatures with dies effects, creatures with ETB effects, or just great mono red creatures and great mono red attackers. This kind of commander is mono red at its best, making a ton of tapped and attacking creatures that are going to hit your opponents for a ton of damage. Now, if you're ever curious about any other cards that might have this kind of effect, you can always just go into Google and go onto gatherer.wizards or Scryfall and type in tapped and attacking. And there you can find a ton of really great options that you can learn to be aggressive with. One last commander I want to highlight is Samut. Samut is great, as every tapped and attacking creature is going to be entering that turn, which is then going to draw you a ton of cards. Add that to the fact that it's already hard to block most of these creatures because there's so many of them, and you'd rather block the source rather than the token itself. You're going to be drawing a ton of cards, getting more token generators, and hitting for a ton of damage. Samut is a great commander, and I highly suggest you check it out. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is how you can support decks like this. If you know something's going to be entering every single turn, you can find ways to help your deck function around that specific thing happening. If you're in black, maybe have some sacrifice outlets, as most of these tapped and attacking creatures are going to be leaving anyways, or they're just great for sacrifice fodder. If you're in white, you can find plenty of token doublers that are going to allow you to get that much more value out of your tapped and attacking creatures coming in. If you're in red, you can have a lot of creature ETB support like Perforos, Witty Roastmaster, or Impact Tremors. If you're in green, you can also have some doublers as well. And if you're in blue, there are a ton of Bident of Thassa effects that are going to help you refill your entire hand with these tapped and attacking creatures. Now, of course, if you're in any combination of these colors, these are all great supporters that you could have. If you're in white-red, it's great to have a combination of red ETB damages and white token creation card draw. If you're in something like white-blue, you might want to have a lot of these combat damage triggers, as well as some token doublers. If you're in green-white, oh boy, you are in for a treat. You have access to the most token doublers, you still have access to these combat damage draw effects, and you have token creation draw effects. Who would have guessed that green-white is great for tokens? I love tapped and attacking, and I hope this video has convinced you to figure out a deck that you might want to try that has tapped and attacking in it as well. Ladies and gentlemen, my name has been Deck Driver, and I hope you guys have all enjoyed this video. Please feel free to like and subscribe, and comment down below what your favorite commander is that uses tapped and attacking. I'd like to take this time now to thank all of my patrons. Thank you to Red Toter, Thalassocrat, George Vazanelis, Chris Smith, Ruby Storm, Raphael DDL, Hyeo, Peachy Star, Zadok, Abrax, Pedro de Olivier, Rylan West, Hooplight, Noah Crete Woodhouse, and Nathan Kwong. Thank you guys all so much for watching and your continued support. If you also would like to support me on Patreon, I would love to see you there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys all next time.